S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl is a first-person survival horror game set in a world where the Chernobyl reactor mysteriously exploded again in 2006, creating an area referred to as the Zone. Whilst it's debatably a horror game, I couldn't pass up the chance to talk about it. Atmosphere. The Zone itself is so hostile it's intimidating. The combat, being as nerve-wracking and brutal as it is, leaves you constantly on the lookout for bandits, weird anomalies and mutants. It's incredibly stressful and every new area fills you with apprehension for what may lie in wait for you. The music also reinforces that feeling of loneliness that permeates through every aspect of the game. Horrifying wails and screams come from the wilderness with no identifiable source, which I found creepy and unsettling. The Zone is an immensely immersive place thanks to the AI system and the way the NPCs and enemies interact freely. It feels like a living, breathing world, which makes each encounter unique. But thanks to the anomalies and strange mutant behavior, it also feels like a mysterious foreign land that's so similar to something you know, but the Zone's nature adheres to a different set of rules, which in itself is disconcerting. When you slip underground, the atmosphere changes radically and you're left with a strong feeling of isolation and dread as you creep around in the dark, surrounded by frighteningly fast and deadly monsters. The atmosphere reminds you that you're alone and your continued survival is uncertain. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. I find this game terrifying no matter how many times I play it. The combat relies on near twitch reactions and the game includes mechanics like your gun jamming, which in life and death combat situations induces panic like no other. Considering how fast you can be killed, hearing your gun click is usually the last thing you'll hear before seeing the game over screen. The monsters in the game usually have a frighteningly high pool of health, which makes killing them before they kill you all the more difficult. Enemies like the poltergeist can lift things off the floor, which I've always found unsettling, but no matter how many times I see it, I'm never ready for when the object comes hurtling towards me. Whilst there are a lot of neat scripted sequences, the most terrifying ones aren't planned. They happen naturally, during combat or when exploring, allowing you to never let your guard down. Gunfire coming out of the darkness catches you by surprise every time it happens, and before you know what's happened, you've usually died. It's terrifying. That's two Harry Masons. Sound design. The soundtrack is a rich selection of ambient pieces that capture the hostility and abandonment of the Zone perfectly, which is occasionally complemented by the screaming of monsters that echoes from the distance. Hearing unearthly moaning reverberating across the plains made me stop and turn my head in the direction of the sound and wonder what was making it so many times. The same can be said for a lot of the underground areas where you can hear the metallic swinging of door hinges and the clanging of metal, but it's rare to find the source of the sound. The death howls of enemy soldiers and monsters are disturbing, and the voices of the zombies that appear later in the game I find really creepy. Being set in Ukraine, there's also the language barrier that prevents you from knowing what enemy soldiers are saying or what they're planning. Overall, it's a fantastic selection of sound and music that perfectly complement the atmosphere. That's three Harry Masons. Gore. There's a lot of dead bodies and some of them are pretty gnarly, but there's not a great deal of gore. Shooting enemies leaves blood splatters on the walls behind them, but that's about it. It's realistic, and that's what the game strives for. That's four Harry Masons. Story. From my perspective, the story starts out fantastically with you being saved from a death truck and being brought back alive to a small camp where your PDA tells you to kill a man called S.T.A.L.K.E.R. But it gets sort of confusing from there on out. It's hard to tell sometimes why you're doing what you're doing, and whilst the missions were interesting for the most part, it was hard to see the connecting lines between them and how you came to be at the Chernobyl reactor other than maybe your dreams hinting to it. It's not like there's not a story here, it's just not easy to understand it. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. A lot of fans agree that mods enhance the experience of the game and can make Shadow of Chernobyl even more frightening, but the vanilla game is stressful enough as it is. It's one of my favourite games and I can't deny how often it frightens me. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool. I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was scared out of my mind in the X-18 lab, I certainly did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.